It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to this episode of Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today I feel like could be a spicy topic. This was, I feel like a popular topic on social media for a little while, and sometimes people get a little maybe triggered by this topic. But I think it's an important dialogue to have in this industry and space. So we want to chat a little bit today about body and food neutrality, just the body like positivity movement, and just our take on that and what that looks like in a healthy and sustainable way. So just kick us off.
Cool. Okay. So the idea kind of spawned off of a podcast that I was invited to do for NPR. It's called The Spark. So that just recently came out if you guys want to give it a listen. They did an episode on language around food, especially in summertime. And right now, when we're recording this, we're coming off of the 4th of July weekend. So it was specifically around holidays. They had a registered dietitian who focused on eating disorders and me on there talking about some tips and tricks and like ways to focus on your own mental health when other people are talking about diets and I can't have this and how many calories does that have in it, which clearly is really unhealthy, right? Can lead to a lot of insecurity. But now that is in high school and college, and again, some of them are people that we've coached and worked with, are kind of in the opposite direction where it's like food and body positivity can lead to a neglect of physical health also. So I think what we want to talk about is that true food neutrality and body neutrality is getting to a point where food and your like or dislike for your physical body does not control you. It's not obsessing your thought. It's not like controlling your thoughts. You're not thinking about it all the time. And you're not scared of the scale, right? We're not saying I'm never going to weigh in because that's unhealthy. It's like, instead, we're just looking at it as a data point. That doesn't mean you need to weigh yourself, but like looking at your body as, oh, it is what it is, and here's what I can do, versus letting our body image or food control our choices. So really becoming educated on what's in our food so that we can make choices based on the outcome we really desire. Sometimes that outcome is health related. Sometimes it's because we really want to enjoy the social occasion. Sometimes it's because there's lots of values that food brings us. And the only values are not fuel or taste, right? Both are important. And I think there's two camps that really swing one way or the other, and both are unhealthy in different ways. Like if you look at the bodybuilding community, there's tons of people who physically look like, oh, they've got it together, and they absolutely suffer with mental health. And then we have this other group who is body positive, I love myself, whatever, but neglecting their physical health. And you can have both. Like we want our clients to love their bodies as they are and start to shift their focus to what they are capable of while also becoming physically healthier.
Yeah. And I think that's the balance, is loving and respecting and appreciating your body for what it can do right now, because it can still, even if it doesn't look the way that you want it to look or look the way that would in your head make you feel confident, it can still do so much for you, and it should be appreciated. And we can both kind of share our like evolution of this essentially, but I don't know if you can relate to this, but I don't feel like there was this like pivotal moment where it changed for me. I feel like I just kind of realized like, oh, that doesn't consume me anymore. And it wasn't this one thing that I did. It took so long. Now that doesn't mean I don't have bad body image days. There are days where I wake up bloated and don't feel as confident and might want to wear something looser when I leave the house, right? Like that doesn't mean every day I'm like, I am amazing and beautiful and perfect and love myself, right? It's just that it does not control my life or dictate my choices, right? I operate and make decisions based on, like Jess said, I want to feel good, right? And I do want to feel confident. And I actually talked to a client about this recently. I like have this very large love for popcorn, but when I eat it, my body doesn't love it. Just my mind loves it. And every time I eat it, I wake up and feel terrible the next day. So most of the time I don't make the choice to eat popcorn because it's not worth it to me to feel like that. But sometimes I just want fucking popcorn, and I just eat it and I know what it's going to bring the next day. Right. And like, that's such a small example, but it's just things like that as an example of like making choices based on what you want out of it. And that applies to obviously so many areas too. But yeah, obviously the bodybuilding space is where I came from. And that's not speaking from personal experience. It was absolutely the worst relationship I had with food. And it took me many, many years to unwind that. And I was using macros during that time too, which is a great testament to the wrong way to do them.
Yeah. And maybe we could talk a little bit also about like our differences, I guess, in our upbringings and our perspective on food and our bodies. So like there's a lot, I can't tell you the amount of times I've called my mom after having a client call and thanked her, like almost in tears. I didn't realize that so many women were so hard and put so much pressure on themselves based on the scale or their pant size, because I grew up in a very healthy environment in that type of way. So I think we'll get into this a little bit more in terms of like action items. How can you start to change your language around food? How can you start to change your language around your body in front of your kids, so that we can break this cycle? But like my mom, I think I can say this because I don't think she'll ever listen to this podcast. My mom's stepmom, like they're from the South, and it's like, oh, baby, too skinny, you better eat. Like, we got to put some meat on your bones. And then in the same breath could be like, oh, look at her. She put on a couple of pounds. And it's like that, those really made my mom very intentional about never wanting to do that to her kids, because it was always a topic. And I think my mom has always been smaller. She wasn't the victim of it necessarily, but her sisters were. Like it's her seeing that really made her more empathetic, I think, than most people when it comes to that topic. So she made an intentional effort to change the narrative. And growing up, our food was food. I love food. Like we had a pretty standard American diet growing up, where we would have like huge, like tuna casserole and all this stuff that was like not very nutrient dense, but other stuff that was. And when we would have something on our plate, we had a rule that like, you have to try it at least once. And if you don't like it, that's cool. You don't have to eat the rest of what's on your plate, but you have to try it at least once. And my cousin actually moved in with us, and she was very obese as a child. She moved in with us when my aunt was really sick, and she lived with us for a few years. And never once did my mom talk to her or us about her weight or her health, but she led by example. And she had the same exact rules for her that she did. Well, you're going to at least try it once. And if you don't like it, that's okay. And eventually my cousin's taste started to shift, and she started to eat a little bit more healthy. And not because of my mom, but now as an adult, she lost over 100 pounds on her own, and she's sustained it, and she's a very healthy person. But I think my mom did not contribute to any body insecurities by ever comparing us or ever talking to her about her weight or her size. It was all, let's lead by example. Let's move because it's fun, type conversations, which again, now that I work with women and I see how prevalent this is in the opposite direction, I'm so grateful for that, for having that perspective.
Yeah. And it is tough. And I feel like we could probably get into this too. But, I do have women who message me and ask about if their kid's overweight, or if their teenager's overweight, or how do I do this? And it's definitely never going to be the same answer as it is for the way that we coach adults, right? Because we don't want to have really any language or any type of narrative like that around food for kids or teens. So it's a totally different approach, where obviously as an adult, we have that discernment and that experience to have, more candid, open conversations based on experience and age and all of that too. But, in my household was the complete opposite of Jess's growing up. It was very, I grew up with a grandmother who, God love her, she's a great woman, but she would comment on your clothes, and if you looked a little pudgier than the last time you saw her, and if you showed up and weren't, dressed to the nines, basically, she was like, "Are you leaving the house like that?" Like, it was very much like I grew up with the mentality of like, always get ready because you never know who you're going to see, right? So I was like, oh God, okay, like I have to always be prepared. Now, obviously, I'm like, I don't give a shit what I smell like if I run into whoever, I don't give a fuck, right? This is take it or leave it. But it took me, I had to do all of that work myself, right? Because I had to undo all of these beliefs. And I remember thinking at one point in my 20s, like, I would look at other women and I'm like, do they all suck in all the time? Or is that just me? Like, I literally am like, when I get home from like social events, I'm like, I can breathe. I feel like I'm like lightheaded from like holding my breath and sucking it in all night. And like, that's just like what I was like learned to do. And obviously I grew up in a household of Weight Watchers and dieting. And, I knew when my mom was on a diet and off a diet. And then I started to do it because I was like, okay, I guess this is like what we do when we don't like our body. We have to do these things and follow these regimens. And, there were some like healthy habits in place, but same, like we ate standard American diet, but, there were more aesthetic things of like, my mom took me to my first hair appointment when I was 12 to get highlights. And I was like, I didn't ask for them. She told me I needed them. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Right. I got my boobs done when I was 17, like just so many things that I had no idea until I grew up. And I was like, not everyone's not like this. Like we don't all do this. So obviously that stems into a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast about aesthetics and the other things that I do. And, I definitely don't, I make decisions for myself and the things that I want to do, and that's fine. Jess and I always joke that we know that I'm basic and we accept it and it's okay. But it's a very different place to be in. So I went through that evolution of like that as a child, but then I jumped into bodybuilding and that just like signed, sealed, delivered everything I had in my head. So it really honestly wasn't until after I had Mason that I was really able to make some progress in that area, which is it's 10 years ago. It's a long time, but it's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. So it's crazy. And there's women in their 40s and 50s and 60s that still.
And we're talking about and a lot of them, those clients will tell us about their mom's diets and relationships with food and all. Also, we're talking about our generation and older, right? So there was a girl at Ursuline, which is the local high school here. And they had some sort of senior project where they each got to pick an initiative. And this girl interviewed me for her project. Hers was about developing a healthy body, like relationship with your body. She interviewed high schoolers at her school and she interviewed 50 of them. 40 of the 50 said that they skipped or missed out on social event because of being self-conscious of their body. So this is not the problem has shifted, right? It's different. The way that we talk about food and stuff is different now. There's not like people celebrating eating disorders in magazines these days. But now we have a whole new world of issues with social media, girls comparing themselves to each other's, the girls seeing AI pictures of women who are supposed to be fitness models. And it's like not even their bodies. Like fake stuff. So there's a whole new layer of this, but it's still an absolute dysfunction, maybe worse than it was before because of social media. So I bring that up because again, we're going to talk about some ways that you can shift this narrative with your own family and your own kids and yourself. But it's still a horrible problem today. So anyway, shout out Caitlin for your project at Ursuline.
I love that.
But I wanted to share it. I thought it's a sad, but current statistic.
Yeah. And it's important too, to know that like, and we talked about this, but I want to emphasize it, is that you can learn to love and appreciate your body where it is and still want to change it. You don't have to pick one or the other. In fact, you shouldn't. That's the whole point of this episode, and having a neutral relationship is accepting and loving and appreciating where it is and still being able to grow and make improvements and be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. And that's really the point about that. And so many women that I talk to, in our consultation calls coming into the program and asking for help, I ask them to describe like how does this affect you on a day-to-day basis? Like truly, not you're bloated or like deeper than that. How does it affect you on day-to-day? Well, I don't want to take my clothes off in front of my husband, and I don't want to do this, right? And it consumes me all day. Every bite of food I eat, I think, is this going to make me fat? Am I going to regret this? Is the right thing? Is this the wrong thing? And it's like, can you imagine? And I can attest to this also because I was in like crazy credit card debt and absolutely hated my life and was miserable mentally when I was in that bodybuilding space because my only focus in life was on my appearance. It consumed me so much that I was in my head excelling in that area, right? But my world was crumbling around me because I had no brain power or capacity to focus on anything else. All I cared about was, can I go to the gym today? And it became an obsession, unhealthy, obviously, which is why, thank God, I woke up one day and literally was like, what am I doing? I can't do this anymore. But I always tell women, I'm like, what does it look like for you to not feel like that? Like, what would you do with your day if you just got dressed and put on the first thing that you put on and you didn't cringe when you walked by the mirror? Like, those are little tiny things, but they have massive impact on your day. And like, I can relate to standing on the scale, and it dictated the way that my entire day went. I would, it's like that when it rains, it pours mentality, but I would get on the scale and it would say something I didn't like. And now everyone's being an asshole. I'm pissed off. I'm having a bad day. I'm tired. I'm this. And it was like that until I stood on the scale the next day, and it swung one way or the other for years. It did that. And then you get into that starving yourself because you don't want to have more bad days than good days. And then you feel restricted, and now you're in this whole other cycle, right? So it's so toxic. But I always just say, like, imagine the brain space you would have if it was just neutral. You just ate food and you put clothes on. Like, it's so crazy, but it really does consume so much of so many women's like adult lives.
And I want to talk about the opposite also. So what you just mentioned is coming from that place of an obsession around it and all. I've seen the opposite, and usually it's from women who used to have that obsessive relationship, actually do the opposite, where they become like, I don't ever want to obsess about my food again. I'm not going to look at a food label. I'm never going to weigh myself. I'm going to eat what I want because it feels good, only focusing on what I want, not what would actually feel good health-wise and physically for me. So I've seen a lot of women swing in the opposite direction. And the way that we tend to unwind that with our clients, like, there's lots of ways to go about this. You'll have registered dietitians who do it by doing food journaling and having clients write down, okay, why did you eat and how did you feel after? Sometimes we do those exercises with our clients. Other times we have those clients track their meals, and they're like a little nervous at first because they're like, I don't want to become obsessive. And I say, like, hey, if it becomes obsessive, I'm pulling it, because that is not the purpose. But what ends up happening is we're adding, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we're adding the good stuff, right? We're adding protein, we're adding fruits and veggies, we're adding sleep, we're adding exercise. And they start to realize, like, wow, I feel good. Oh my gosh, I'm tracking my food, and check this out. I'm actually eating way more than I was before, and I haven't gained anything. So
it's like we're connection to make in their head.
Yeah. So we're actually unwinding that pattern for them through becoming more aware of what they're eating, but it's making them less scared of food also. So they're starting to make that connection. And again, tracking forever is absolutely not our
right. We're
intention.
Doing the work on the back end
we're doing this for a purpose, but it ends up unwinding that. So there's a way to go about it properly that can maintain your mental health. And if you are focusing on health, your physique will change over time, and you will become more and more comfortable in your skin, versus only focusing on physique. There's often a lot of backfiring there from our mental health.
Yeah. And that's obviously, and, honestly, if you think about like I feel like I did swing kind of far on that pendulum for a very brief period after that, but it wasn't, I don't think it was necessarily in a body positivity way. It was more in a way of, rebelling the thing that I used to do. Right. So I definitely went, I don't have to, right. Like, in my head, I'm like, I quit the stage. I don't have to diet anymore. Nobody's judging me. I can do whatever I want and eat whatever I want. I don't have to work out anymore, whatever. And I did have, unfortunately, such an unhealthy relationship with exercise and with food, where I went to an extreme. And that's the other reason, obviously, not to do that is it's the same thing with like restricting your calories. You're going to binge. It creates a bad relationship with food. Like, that's why you want to avoid extremes and let the pendulum swing like slow in the middle versus going one side to the other. But I went to that other extreme for a second. And then I was like, I power lifted for a second. I was like, that was me. Like, I know I can't stay in this space. I have to find my love for this again in a healthy way. And it took me a little bit, but I did start to just slowly make changes until I got back to this place that I felt good, and I learned how to work out for my health and not just to change my physique. And that was actually, it was tough to learn. And I did have coaches over the years to help with that because, I didn't know. I was like, I don't know what a healthy amount of volume is in the gym. I don't know what the average person, like what's my, like, I mean, I don't like BMI, but like, what's a healthy, like weight for me that's normal, but I'll still feel good. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. I was very judgmental. I was like, you're shredded or you're lazy. Like it's terrible. But, I think you have to look, like Jess said, beyond your physique and look at all of the things that your body can do. And I think that's why I've gotten so attached to and like have this love for the functional space, because it's so much about taking care of this one body that you have. And this is one vessel in life, right? And to me, I'm like, I want to cherish this. I want to feel as good as I can. I have family members with health things going on, and it creates that, it's not good to say probably, but like almost a healthy fear of like, hey, like I don't want that in my life. And I want to make decisions now that don't breed that result, right? And make sure I do something different. So, yeah, I think focusing on health is such an overlooked component. And once we can get a client to make that connection, that physique will follow health, and you should want to feel good and all of those things, and they make that connection themselves in their head, it's really powerful. And I think that's the sustainability component, because it goes deeper than physique. And I don't think physique is enough of a motivator for people.
And it's not an intrinsic motivator, right? That like there's a lot of people who get physically fit and are still struggle with these insecurities and see themselves the way they saw themselves before.
Not that you don't want to change your physique desperately, but I don't think it's deep enough to make that forever.
Right. Again, if you focus on health, true health, holistic health of your mind and your body, not just your physical, the physical does follow. I think you made a really good point there that I hadn't thought about in terms of shifting your focus away from the scale and towards performance when you mentioned focusing on powerlifting for a little bit. So I had mentioned like another way to go about this other than tracking macros might be journaling your food, right? Maybe you journal, how did I feel? Did I eat because I felt pressured to eat because other people were there? Did I eat because it was in front of me? And this is an emotional thing, like journaling the why and then how do you feel can be therapeutic. Another thing that we often do with our clients is shift their focus basically towards the wins that are performance based. So, or the wins that are, again, intrinsic, like actual health based of, okay, cool, your sleep is improving, your libido is starting to come back. We are lifting heavier than we lifted before and you're feeling strong. I have a client who was like, hey, guess what? I lifted a bag of food at Tractor Supply by myself and I didn't need to ask the store guy for help. Like those types of wins and strength, if you can focus on strength, if you can focus on the fact that you're squatting deeper and your knees don't hurt anymore, start focusing on performance goals also, because it can get you, if you're feeling competitive, because I think a lot of people are type A people where they're like, but I want a goal. What should my goal weight be? And it's like, whoa. Let's pick a different goal. Maybe your goal is your range of motion in a certain lift. Maybe your goal is your strength. Maybe your goal is finding more and more time to unwind each night and improving your. There's lots of different things that you can compete with yourself on that might be a little bit healthier for your mental health that will also result in the physical side effects over time. So maybe you can shift. That's just, I want to give you guys that action item of if you're not doing that now. I think that's why like CrossFit works for a lot of women. Like I don't program that way. You guys know that I don't tend to program that way because there's so many complex movements. I think the risk of injury is higher, whatever. But one of the really cool values of it is you're in a group of women who are all cheering each other on for performance. Wow, you're so strong. Look what you lifted today. Like that instills such a healthy relationship with strength and their bodies because they're not talking about the scale. They're not talking about how they look in their
different confidence.
Yeah, you're focusing on performance. And I think that can be super, super healthy.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And that was another like adventure and path that I went down to is CrossFit. I kind of jumped around for a little bit. And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. And another like challenge that I made for myself really through the last like I don't know, probably like all of 2023 really was my slowdown, because it just wasn't something that I did. And I was I don't like yoga. So I started to go. I went to Pilates for a little bit last year. I went to yoga for a little bit last year. I pay for an app, like an annual membership to do guided meditations. I started doing EFT tapping. I went to EMDR therapy. Like that was my year. Last year was my year for that. And that was like a whole different health challenge and focus for me. And it was honestly, I think it was like almost like a quantum leap in my health, going through, which is crazy because I'm somebody who's lifted weights and I ate healthy all these years. Right. But, and that's great. Like obviously that serves a purpose and compounds over time for my health and everything. But last year was a huge leap in my health mentally, which is also overlooked. Like we sacrifice our mental health for our physical appearance a lot. And I did it personally. But I think that can be super powerful. And that also healed maybe some other like lingering things in terms of like physique and like that appearance concern and relationship with food. Like it helps with all of that, because you don't realize maybe like past traumas or past experiences or things that have an impact that maybe you don't even realize there's a connection. I remember like talking through some things in therapy and I'm like, I would say something. I'm like, I don't even know why that just left my mouth. Like, I don't even know I thought that. Like, that's crazy. But it's having that intentional time to sit and sort and talk through your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings. And I think as much as we are intentional with lifts and everything else, therapy would be something to be intentional about. But it doesn't mean all of these things require everyone needs to run and make a therapy appointment. It was just, that was very intentional time, sit down time for me to reflect and navigate some of those things that were lingering. And like something like meditation, yoga, all of those other things that you can focus on can be so, so powerful and spill over into every other area too, for kind of how you feel about yourself physically, everything.
And I want to give a little disclaimer on what Jill just said in terms of expectations. So she's talking about adding yoga, adding Pilates, doing EFT tapping. All of those things are very intentional inputs for our parasympathetic nervous system. She was focusing on her internal health and her stress systems of her body to learn how to put her body back into recovery mode better. Which is healing physically also. It can heal your hormones, make it so that you don't have wacky cortisol dumps. So very healthy, intentional for her nervous system. If someone said, well, I'm just going to do yoga and Pilates to get a physique goal, I would say time out. That's a different goal. So we need to know what our outcome is when we're choosing these exercise modalities also. So again, I'll go to the yoga example. I incorporate yoga. I try to once a week when I'm in a good season of it. I try to once a week because I'm at a desk job and I don't like how my upper back feels. It helps me with my mobility, right? That supports me in my life and in my lifts. I don't do it to get a snatched physique, right? Same goes for CrossFit. I have a lot of women at CrossFit who have texted me about nutrition stuff saying like, I'm doing all these things, but my physique's not changing. And I'm like, whoa. If that's the modality that we're choosing for exercise, our focus should be on performance and strength, right? Our focus, we're not doing that for physique. If you are a marathon runner, your intentions and outcome is endurance. It is not physique. So you need to know what the adaptation is for your body when you choose each of these modalities, because they all bring a very different value. And I think sometimes people hear us rag on F45 or CrossFit or Pilates. We're doing that because people hire us specifically for physique and health and long-term maintenance of weight loss, not because there's anything wrong with those for the sake of just general movement. It's just, if you tell me physique is your number one outcome, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to pull back the running and we're going to add strength training because you're telling me what's most important to you.
Yeah. And I had a client conversation recently, and she's more in a season of maintenance, and she's lifting and doing all of her things, right? She's in a really good groove, but she started going to yoga and she loved it so much. She started going multiple days a week, and she's like, well, what do I do? Do I stop lifting since I'm ready to maintain? And I was like, what's your goal? And we kind of talked through that. And I was like, why do you have this? Like, I have to pick one or the other, right? Like, you're telling me yoga feels good, and I I don't doubt it, because you're a business owner. You're extremely busy. You carry a lot of stress. Of course, that feels good for you. And I think that's a great input to incorporate. And that can be part of your maintenance routine forever, right? So she's like, but I go to the gym 4 days a week and that feels really good. But now I want to go to yoga 2 or 3 days. And I was like, can we go to the gym 2 or 3? And like you can alternate. Like even if you pick 3 gym days this week, you can do 2 next week. Like that's okay. There's no rules here. So we kind of talked
And honestly,
about what that looks like for her.
For physique maintenance, if you are happy with your physique, for physique maintenance, I usually recommend 1 to 2 strength training days a week.
Yeah.
As a minimum for anybody, right? So if there's somebody who's a runner, I will program, even if we're programming for a running goal, I will still program them 1 to 2 lifts a week for maintenance. So it really just depends. If you want physique change, then we're going to have a different conversation. And again, at the end of the day, once we've found that place where you're healthy and feeling good in your body, then it's about finding balance. We always use that word balance, but like that goes for both exercise and for food. So, okay, to bring it back to the food piece, in a similar way, there's different outcomes that come from our choices, right? Just like we just said about exercise. So I may want a milkshake or cheese fries every single meal because I like the taste. You guys know, I love pad thai. Like give me some drunken noodles and pad thai and I would be happy for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I don't want the outcomes or the consequences that are associated with that choice every day. So at the end of the day, I need to decide what's worth it for me in the grand scheme. And it does not need to be all or nothing. Sometimes, most of the time, I choose the healthier, more nutrient dense food option. And again, you need to maybe become educated on what's in your food so that you know. But most of the time, I'll choose a healthier option because it makes me feel good and perform better and have more energy and have a healthy quality of life. Other times, I choose the milkshake because I really am enjoying that quality time with my family at the creamery. Or I choose the cheese fries out to brunch with my friends, like whatever the case may be. I'm making that choice for a different value, right? So I think that there's ownership that we could take around our language too. Even though I want the milkshake, I'm choosing not to have it right now because my goals are not aligned with having it right now. And that's okay. That doesn't mean I have an unhealthy relationship with food. That's great because I'm owning my choices and I know the outcomes of my choices. I think that that's really important because a lot of times you'll hear women use words like I can't or I shouldn't. I can't have this. I'm having a cheat day. I can't have this. It doesn't fit my diet right now.
Or the language of I am an emotional eater, or I am a stress eater, or I can't stop myself around sugar. It's like, why are you just like pigeonholed yourself into this identity, and you can choose to change that at any moment. I'm not saying you just stop saying I'm an emotional eater and it's going to stop. Obviously there's intention behind that. But you do not don't label yourself with those things because you can change that. And often this is why, if you go back to, I think it was episode 3, just and what we talk about in Fueled is adding versus taking things away, because a lot of times we just, I crave sugar, I do this, whatever. And it's like, well, let's make sure you have enough protein and fiber in your diet. And all of a sudden, you're not going to label yourself as somebody who can't control themselves around sweets anymore, right? Because you're just not nourishing your body enough. So it's little things like that. But also, we have clients that come in and they have super heavy social lives, right? They drink, they like to go out. Like, I'm not willing to give this up. They'll literally say, I'll accept slower results because I know this, I'm not going to give this up. And we're like, okay, great. Let's work on the things we can work on. But what happens is we never tell them you need to stop drinking or you can't do this. Over time, they realize and make that decision on their own of like, wow, I actually don't feel as good when I do this thing, or I feel better when I do this, right? And then all of a sudden they are setting boundaries when they go out with their friends of, hey, I'm not going to have more than 2 tonight, or I'm going to eat this instead of this, or I'm going to bring my own snacks, but you guys are okay, right? Like all of a sudden they are coming to that conclusion and setting those healthy boundaries. And that's the other reason I love tracking so much, is because there's very specific data correlated with this is how I felt that day or that week or whatever. And now we can look back and say, well, look, you didn't drink this week. And remember, you said your sleep was at a 9 when normally you say it's a 4, and you set your energy and your stress at work was better when normally it's this, right? So we start to make those connections. And that's the other reason that I love having the data so much, because they can make those connections in their head. After I start to point a few out, then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And they start to become more in tune with their body, which is more health focused, right? Even if it's unintentional, they step away from focusing on the scale and they're like, oh, wow, that thing didn't make me feel good, or that decision made me feel great. Or sometimes they'll check in and say, listen, I know I said I was going to commit to this, but this thing came up and I had so much fun. And like, I know the scale's up, but I don't care. Right. And that, like, I love when they say that to me as a coach. I'm like, amazing. I'm so glad you had fun. You made that conscious decision in the moment and you feel good after. Like, you have now disassociated and you don't have guilt with that decision anymore.
We're closing the gap.
Yeah.
We're closing that gap of you fighting with yourself in your head. If you say, I can't have this, or I shouldn't have this, or, oh, I had it, but I'm really guilty. You are battling yourself. If you make a choice and you own and know what the expectations are, boom, there's now peace within, right? Whether that choice is healthy or unhealthy, you know what the ownership is, right? Yeah. So like, that's, I mean, my husband is sober. That was a thing that he went through when he was battling stopping drinking. And it was like, going out with friends, it makes your life a lot easier too when you own it. Because when you go out with friends and you say like, oh no, I don't really, I shouldn't, or I whatever, I'm trying to think of the language, but if you say like,
I shouldn't, or right now, or
I'm not drinking today. It's like, if you cut it like that, people will convince you like, oh, well, just have one, or just this, or just that. If you say, no, I don't want one, or no, I'm not drinking. Nobody questions you. Nobody says anything. So the same thing can happen with food. So people are playing. It's not in a nasty. I've had experiences. One specific example where people are like, well, you can have just one, look at you. And it's like, whoa. Yeah, but I would never judge you for your choice, whether it was healthy or unhealthy. So don't judge me. Don't try to push me. Like we all have our own individual goals. And at the end of the day, I need to live with my choices because my consequences, my health consequences, how I feel, I'm the only one who has to live with them. You are the only person who has to or gets to live with your choices for the rest of your life. Make them so that they actually feel good, both physically and mentally. So, okay, we do have some actions in action items and how you guys can
add one more thing that I just thought of. So also if people are commenting on things, if it's a random person, you brush it off and you move on, right? You never see them again. Who cares? Or if you want to put them in their place and educate them, feel free to do that too. But if it's people that are close to you and you're like, I'm having a hard time sticking to my goals because even if I have this good intention, I feel like I'm being sabotaged. There's a couple of options here, right? Sometimes, and not always the case, I have had times where I've had to distance myself because the people I'm surrounding myself with are not supporting the decisions that I make for me. And that's okay, right? It doesn't matter who they are. It's okay to create that distance or set it, or, do what you need to do there. But also it's okay to set boundaries. And it's very appropriate if someone is in your life, like if it's a parent or an aunt or a cousin that's constantly making comments, pull them aside and say, listen, this is where I'm at and this is what I need from you. Can you respect this boundary? If that's no, maybe you need to go the distance route. Or they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this was X, Y, and Z, right? So don't be afraid to have those conversations and stand up for yourself too.
That's a great point also. If somebody is commenting on your body or your food, or you're at the dinner table at a family function and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're eating that, or comment on your dress or on your pant size or whatever, like those are stemming from those people's insecurity with food and their relationships with their own body. So again, whether you choose to address it with them or not, you certainly can. I think that the way Jill just said it, everybody would respect that. I say this to say most of those people do not have shitty intentions. They're not trying to ruin your relationship with your body. They are coming from a dysfunctional. They're projecting and they're coming from a dysfunctional place themselves. I'm saying this so that you can give them the benefit of the doubt and almost take it with a grain of salt. While also maybe you can kind of help them reprogram how it's impacting and landing with people. My aunts, I have some aunts who comment on each other's weight all the time and on what they're eating and on their diets, and they're looking at the back of calories every single place we go. I've been pretty vocal. They know what I do, right? Like I've been vocal enough about my stance on it in front of my kids that I heard one of them recently at a party say to my kid, like, oh man, Callie, you're going to get so strong from all that food you're eating. And I was like, yes, it's working. Like I'm programming my aunts to talk to my kids differently than the way that they've talked to some of my cousins. And it's so cool when you start to see that shift, because again, their intentions were never bad. It's their own obsession with their body weight. So yeah. there was something else on my notes. Oh, never mind. I was going to give another example. You can respond in a way that trains somebody to focus more on health and strength. So this literally happened yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, what a perfect topic that we're doing. So my grandmother passed away, and we were at her funeral yesterday. And my cousin, who has lost a lot of weight in a very healthy, sustainable way over the course of years, one of our aunts went up to her and was like, oh my gosh, you would never think you'd be this skinny, did you? And my cousin, without missing a beat, said, well, I'm very healthy. Or she said something about like, I feel really good and I feel really strong and healthy right now. And I, like, as soon as my aunt walked away, I high-fived her. Like, yes, that's the way to respond to somebody like that. It's not, I'm going to take it personally. She's like, oh my gosh, she doesn't know any better. She's going to tell me how skinny I am, and let's celebrate skinniness. And over here, my cousin's thinking like, I've started eating fruits and vegetables. I've increased my protein. I started lifting weights to look toned. Like she's done all these things. It's not just about being skinny, because if we just comment on somebody's skinniness or pant size, you can get skinny in a lot of unhealthy ways too. Right. People get skinny when they're sick or when they're overly stressed out. So like, let's make it a thing where we do not comment on people's body size. We celebrate health and strength wins. And physical activity. I'm like, cool, it looks like you're having a lot of adventures outside lately. Like, this sounds silly. It sounds like how I talk to my kids, but like, do not make somebody else's body weight or size a thing, period. Because it's also training all the people who are around you. If I hear my aunt celebrate my other aunt for, oh my gosh, you look so skinny, you fit in that dress, you're 20 pounds lighter. It's like, that's training the people who are listening, the little ears around you.
Yeah. And then God forbid she responds and she's like, oh, thanks. I've been low carb for the last 8 months. Great. Yes. Now every girl around her just said, okay, well, when I get fat, I need to go low carb. Thanks for that.
And people will compliment me and tell me I'm better. You're now training those other people, and the kids especially, that there is value to being smaller. So let's celebrate value in being healthier, not being smaller.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too. My grandma always makes comments on my weight she'll do that. And then she'll push a giant plate of food at me. And here, I made you cookies. And it's like, that just goes to show you how many generations lives, right? They indulge and they do these things, but then they treat their bodies poorly as a punishment for the bad decisions that they made. And it's like, no, I'm good. I'm happy where I'm at. I like my body and I don't want a cookie right now, you know? So it's okay to have those open conversations and boundaries, just as if somebody was rude or disrespectful to you in any manner and you would stand up for yourself. It's the same thing. Like, if you don't want them to like speak a certain way to your kid or say something to your kid, like, have that same respect and boundary for yourself too. And like Jess said, it's really powerful. It's going to be a compound effect. It's just like on social media, we hear something and we run with it, right? Like, let's set that narrative of focusing on being healthy and strong. And let's say that over and over for Gen Z and whoever else is listening to us. And hopefully eventually we break into a healthy, sustainable, balanced approach to just like fitness, health, and life in general. But there's always going to be the one,
Yeah. And again, at the end of the day, we have to own our choices, right? So if my aunt has commented on my weight my whole life, I'm not blaming her for my relationship with food. I'm saying, you know what? It is what it is. She is who she is. What can I do about it now? Right? Like, what are the choices I am going to make for my life? Because I'm the only one responsible for that.
I'm not going to change the way that I live my life. So it's fine.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so action items, things that you guys can start doing now. Now, this might take time, right? If you've spoken to yourself a certain way, or like I tend to be a people pleaser, and Jill's helping me reprogram, like, no is a full sentence. It's okay to just say no, right? Like, it's taking me time to not justify my actions to people. In that same way, it's probably going to take you time to change how you're speaking to yourself, to change how you're speaking in front of other people about food. Like, this can be a very intentional thing, and it's probably going to take time. Give yourself grace. With that said, like, my number one rule, all of my clients will tell you this. When we are in the gym, my number one rule in one-on-one personal training sessions is my clients are not allowed to talk bad about themselves in that hour that we are together, so that we can start to learn how to look at our bodies for what they're capable of. So check yourself. When you hear yourself, oh, I got to lose that last 5 pounds, or, oh, I really hate the cellulite on my legs, or, oh, look at this skin under my arms. When you hear yourself saying that, combat it with logic or saying something positive. And again, this is not to do corny affirmations. This is with the truth. You're not saying some random stuff, but like, okay, I also had 2 kids in the last couple of years. Like, how cool is that? I also am way stronger than I was 6 months ago. Like, let's shut those negative conversations down, focus on what our body can do. And then when, especially out loud in front of your children and especially your daughters, be conscious, because the way you talk about themselves, like, you would never talk about them in that way. And that's the way they are going to look at themselves in the mirror. If you are picking yourself apart, they're going to start looking at themselves in that same critical way. And that's, I know, nobody's intentions when they're doing that.
And also when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, just like she's saying, reprogramming the things you're saying, do it with your thoughts too. If you tend to look at yourself in the mirror, pick yourself apart, whatever you're saying, you wouldn't say it to your kid, don't say it. Don't. And if you think it, go to your journal and write down the opposite of whatever you just thought and start to reprogram that way too.
Yep. And the way that I talk to my kids about food, again, I'm very intentional about this now that I'm a mom with 2 little girls. Like, I think about it way more than I ever thought about it before. I talk to my clients in the same way, and it's not like I'm babying them, but we're talking about what healthy foods do for us and how they make us strong. And look how less frequently you've gotten sick, client, ever since you started taking care of your body and sleeping more and eating fruits and veggies. How cool is that? You used to tell me that you got sick once a month. Okay, eating well makes us get sick less. It makes us faster. It gives us energy. I feel so good. I have healthy bowel movements, like all these other things. Talk about those things. Talk about the health wins when you're talking about healthy foods. I get my kids involved in cooking and grocery shopping, and I try to lead by example, and I let them have autonomy over their choices. Instead of telling them, you have to eat this or you don't get dessert, it's like, hey, how many colorful things can we put on our plate? Right? If my daughter cooks with me, she's then like, Dad, did you see this thing I cooked? She's proud of it. And that might be a food that otherwise, if I just made and told her to eat, she would be like, ew, I don't like that. But she's excited because she helped me cook it. Like, focusing on strength and speed and performance, I would never, ever talk to them about weight or size. So let's shift the way that we talk to our kids too. If you suspect your child is overweight in an unhealthy way, do not talk to them about their weight. Start incorporating more healthy foods. Start going for family walks after dinner. Lead with action, and the physical health will follow. Do not lead with a conversation about them being fat. Like, that is absolutely dysfunctional for that child's mental health. And then I guess anything else, Jill? I feel like there was I was going to give an example of Callie. So like,
I was going to bring this up if you didn't actually.
Okay, this is extreme ownership. Okay, this is what we want from our clients. This is I texted Jill when this happened. This was like a year ago, probably at this point. She was so little. I texted Jill when this happened because I was just like, this is stupid but hilarious. Callie, we were at a family function and there was like these giant cookies, and it was a like potluck style huge party bonfire. Like, the kids were running around doing their own thing, right? Callie was going around and asking different people, hey, could you get me a cookie? And if somebody said, hey, did you ask your mom? She would just be like, oh, no, thanks. And she would go find another person. And she was 3 years old, but she was like, I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to ask. She ended up having so many cookies. And we've had conversations before where, like, if her tummy hurts, like, hey, it could be because we had all this sugar. Like, there's nothing wrong with having 1 or 2 cookies, but when you have 12, like, look, your tummy hurts. You don't want that, right? Like, I'm trying to draw the association with how she feels. So anyway, she ends up, I think she ends up having diarrhea or something. Like, it was absolute, like, it was horrible. We were on the car ride home. She's like, I have to go. And we did not make it in time. It was terrible. Again, she's 3 years old. She can't control it. She's newly potty trained, whatever. The next week, we're at a softball game and another mom brings a whole like little box with Oreos and all this stuff. We had a conversation about it. And I was like, hey, Cal, remember last week when you had all those cookies, your tummy really hurt? It didn't feel good, right? And she was like, it's okay if I have diarrhea. I really want the cookies. And I texted Jill because I was like, okay, all right on, dude. Like, this is your choice. And this is your consequence.
She was like, I accept this.
This is your choice. This is your consequence. And you know how the food is going to make you feel. Like, that is what we want for every single one of our clients. You know what? If cheese hurts your stomach and you're like, but that's okay, I really want it in this moment, at least you're owning your choices and you're accepting the outcome, right? Like, that's where we want you to get to.
You can't say, okay, I want it, and then the next day say, I'm mad, or the scale's up, or whatever. You got to own it all the way through. You can't back out after you do it.
Yep. And that's that. That's the end of it, right? Like ultimately what we want you to get out of this is like, educate yourself on what nutrient dense foods look like so that you can take care of your physical health. And then also mental health is important. It doesn't mean one or the other. Body positivity or body neutrality does not mean ignorant bliss, right? We need to educate ourselves so that we can be physically healthy. But then at the end of the day, also enjoy stuff you like, because owning your choices is where you're going to find that mental peace along with your physical health.
Yeah. And that's a balancing act too, right? So own your choices, right? And own them all the way through and know the outcome and have the right expectation. But also, like, it's about what you do most of the time, right? So own your decision, whether it's a good one or a bad one. And like we talked about, most of the time we make the decision in the moment that is going to make us feel good and make us healthier and point us in that right direction. And sometimes we're making the decision to be social and be present. And that's also very healthy and important too, right? Like it doesn't have to be about the food or the thing, but like maybe you haven't seen your friends in a long time and you want to like really just be in the moment and not think about food and macros and calories and whatever. That's also very important for your health. So it's a balancing act. And you just kind of learn as you go, and it's okay to not be perfect, but you just have to own it and make the decisions most of the time. So I think that was a good one today.
I think so too. Cool.
Cool. All right, guys. See you next time.